All right, welcome back to the show. Of course, this is David Scales for Surf Splendor. Today's episode developed unlike any other that I've ever done. Clint Runyon is the name of our guest, and he's actually the winner of last month's Surfboard Giveaway. I was emailing back and forth with him about winning the board, and turns out he's a former Marine who discovered surfing while he was stationed in Southern California at Camp Pendleton, which is adjacent to San Onofre, Trestles, some really great surf spots just north of San Diego as well. So he had access to all that. But because he was a military man, raising a young family on a military man's budget, he couldn't afford new surfboards. So what did he do? He built his own. And now, after 20 years of being in the Marines, he's retired and he builds boards full time, which is kind of an incredible origin story. I asked him to get on a Zoom call to kind of detail it further. And really early on into the call, I realized this whole story needed to be shared with everybody. So that is what we're doing here today. Speaking of surfboard giveaways, we are giving away an AJW. The model is called Back to Future, and it's kind of an 80s hybrid, modernized 80s hybrid. I've got an interview with AJW already in the can. It was supposed to go out this week, but we're bumping it to next week, so you will hear much more about that board next week. But if you want to get in on winning it, of course, you support our podcast. You can do it on surfsplendorpodcast.com. It's $5 a month. We don't paywall any content. Everything is available for free, but we do rely on those $5 monthly contributions as a kind of foundation for the business. It's predictable, recurring revenue. So we thank you for that and your consideration there. And then, of course, all of it beyond that is made possible by Real Water Sports, Veyer Watches, and of course, Rourke.com. Real Water Sports, in fact, carries AJW model surfboards. So if you don't win it, but you want one, buy it from them. They'll ship it to you for one low flat fee. Of course, Veyer Watches, I don't mention this enough, but you can dress up or dress these things down. I've got the rubber strap on it right now, so ready for the water. But they actually give you 2 straps with every purchase. You get your choice. So I've got a bunch of NATO straps here. Look at, they come in a bunch of different colors. And then I've got the leather strap here on the Field Watch. So kind of a dressed up version. Can wear this out to dinner with my wife, just swap out the strap, wear it in the ocean. Guaranteed waterproof, assembled in the USA. Veyer is spelled V-A-E-R. They are an incredible brand, incredible price, great quality product. And then, of course, Rourke.com provides my wardrobe for whatever life throws at me. You can just see stylish cut, stylish fit, but durable fabrics, kind of built for adventure. So ripstop fabrics on the pants, little zippers that keep your pockets closed without your cell phone sliding out every time you sit down. They have magnetic closures on some of the other pockets. So I'm a big fan, but believe it or not, my wife is just as big of a fan of Rourke.com. So check them out. We have a promo code, Splendor15. That'll save you 15% on any purchase, anytime. So go and load up there, Rourke.com. Okay, without further ado, I am proud to introduce to you one of the people who makes the surfing world go round. Local North Carolina board builder, Clint Runyon of Runyon Surfboards. Enjoy.
Surf Splendor.
Sweet. Yeah. Sick,
Well,
man. It's good to meet you.
great to officially meet you too, man. I'm actually, to be perfectly honest, I wanted a woman to win this surfboard.
Me too. Me too.
Did you? Okay.
Yes.
Turns out the percentages, the odds were against the women on this one. There's very few female supporters. There are some, but there's fewer.
Yeah.
And so it was more likely to be a male. But I did check your history, and it looks like you set up support in 2020. So the fact that you're a longtime supporter makes everything right in my mind.
Well, dude, I got to tell you, man, what you guys are doing is epic. It's freaking awesome. Like from the time that I found you, I think I found you guys when I was still living in Japan or something, like 6 or 7 years ago. I
Wow.
want to say. Like I don't remember, and I don't know if I just randomly found you or somebody told me about you guys, but I was like, this is the whole ball game. Like,
Wow.
why are we not talking about this from years ago? And I told, I've turned so many people onto you guys of like, if you really want to hear about like what's actually going on, you need to listen to this stuff, instead of like regular crap media that's, whatever's being cycled out by big companies. So
Well,
yeah,
that's
it's still,
generous. First of all, thank you for saying that. That's generous. And I'll give you a little bit of my perspective on, I don't know, how we even ended up doing what we're doing. I don't know if I've told the whole story on any one podcast. I've probably told bits and pieces of it over time, but I'll just fill it in now since
Mhm.
I think listeners would appreciate it too. But before I do that, I have production notes I have to hit. Somebody told me
Yeah.
that we need somebody told me that we need to tell people to subscribe on YouTube. So it's not enough just to go watch on YouTube. You're supposed to click the subscribe button. So anybody listening on to the audio version, go to YouTube and do that. Or if you're on YouTube, at least click the button to subscribe there. And then, of course, these surfboard giveaways are a way to say thank you to the supporters. So we started doing the podcast for free over 10 years ago. We did it for free for at least 5 years. And then it's along those 5 years, listeners were chiming in and saying, hey, we want to donate money to you. Patreon had just started. And so they're like, we support other podcasts on Patreon. Can we help support you guys? And it was becoming more of a workload. So we kind of needed to fund it. And there's hard costs involved, of course, with doing it.
Yeah.
So we needed to fund it. So we opened up listener support. And that's been amazing. And it's kind of the foundation of the business. Advertising there's been great months at times and there's been slow months at times. So it's unpredictable, but the listener support is dependable because it's recurring. And so we decided for those listeners, rather than putting things behind a paywall that only they had access to, and then there were the haves and the have-nots, we're like, just keep it available for free for everybody. But as a thank you, we'll do surfboard giveaways. So we started partnering with board builders who we just kind of wanted to shine a light on and support them. And then somebody would win a surfboard and it's a win-win for everybody. So that's how we ended up here.
Yeah.
But to kind of answer or to fill in what you were talking about, my original effort was just to interview long form interviews with people because that's the style of podcast that I liked. But people wanted news updates, talk about contests or whatever. So Scott
Yeah.
Bass and I started doing that. And then Chaz and I had interviewed Chaz a couple of times and there was more to discuss with him. So we started doing the gossipy kind of TMZ style podcast.
Yeah.
But it was all things that were happening in the magazines. And, it was almost built unintentionally after the magazine template. Like you open a magazine and there's a long form interview, and then you go a couple pages and there was contest results, and then there was the industry gossip section. And so almost unintentionally, we did on audio what the magazines were doing in print, but over the course of those 10 years, the magazines went away. So it's almost like
Yeah.
we were modeling it after them, but then they disappeared. And then we're the ones just showing up week
Yeah.
after week and actually doing the work. And I always, perfectly honest, felt like an outsider from the beginning on. But people within the industry ended up listening. And so then started, giving me intel, or we'd become friends. And so it just becomes whatever's going on in the industry becomes part of just my awareness. And I think people did appreciate some of the things that you were talking about. And so within the industry, they would then feed me stories or gossip or behind the scenes stuff. So that became part of the weekly conversations too. And just by virtue of showing up and doing the work week in and week out for years, you develop a talent for it or a skill for it. And then also a rhythm that it makes it easier, I guess, when you're doing it that frequently. So here we are, all those years later.
Yeah. Yeah. I honestly, man, I did media before. I was a combat photographer in the Marine Corps for decades.
No
And
way.
so like doing production work and understanding what production takes, I could have told you 7 years ago, this would have replaced, copy print stuff, because that's where everybody was leaning towards. I can listen to it on my phone in my car. I could, I listen to you guys all the time, as everybody has said, people have said this forever. Like I'm listening while I'm like shaping, you know what I mean? Like I've got my noise canceling headphones in and I can listen to, dude, you guys' interviews, your interview with Hank Warner, it's just sheer gold. You know what I mean? Like listening to some of these old legends talk about, you know, how they came up and all that kind of stuff is magic. And that's what people want. You know, I don't want your spiel on the next pair of freaking flip-flops or board shorts. You know what I mean? I don't care. You know, I don't need the pitch. I need, you know, I want to know what's going on in the industry and what people are really doing. And I think that that was an easy for you guys. You were already there.
Mhm.
You had pivoted, and that was that, you know, your genre, whatever, you know, moving to podcasting was the timing was as perfect as it gets. I don't know if it can be replicated as perfectly as, you know, as that was.
Thanks.
Um,
I
but the
think
production, dude, geez, you guys' production load, good on you. Seriously, good on you. The amount of production,
uh,
geez.
it's crazy. I told a friend like 5 years ago, I was at his house and talking about the podcast, and he was like, I go, yeah, I don't know how much longer I can do it. Like, I feel like I'm a hamster, you know, on a wheel from week to week. I don't even lift my head up to survey what
Right.
needs to be done. I just keep going. I'm like, I don't know if I can continue to do it. He goes, dude, you've been doing it 5 years. I think you figured it out already, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, you're
Yeah.
right. I guess I have. I feel a certain level of anxiety, but it's unnecessary because I already figured it out. I'm already doing it. So yeah, we
Yeah.
just keep our
Yeah,
head
for
down and
sure.
keep going.
Yeah. Well, that, you know, adding in, your, you know, I think you've got an editor or something, whatever production guys you have, like whatever assistants, parts, pieces where you can piecemeal, you know, where you're confident as the guy who runs the whole thing, you can piecemeal some of that stuff and have the funds to do it, you know, to take the load off is that's the ball game. You know,
Yeah.
that's the whole deal to keep you moving, especially at the pace, man. Geez, the amount of the amount of media. I don't think anybody, like, unless you do this stuff, they have no clue the amount of work it takes to produce 3 shows a week, and then the media, and then the YouTube, and then all of the parts and pieces. It's, bro, seriously, bravo. Like, good
Thank
on
you.
you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I don't need the pat on the back, but it does feel nice to get it because I do forget sometimes the workload. But that's what like, so now obviously we're talking about supporter $5 a month contributions, but then we also had some advertisers, and now we've got kind of secure partnerships with Rourke, Real Water Sports, the retailer in your neck of the woods, and then Veyer
Yeah.
watches that you hear me talk about on every show. And those conversations basically were, I had the talk that you just gave, which was I don't really have the time to deal with accounting and invoicing and all this stuff month to month. Can we just be a partner? Just
Yeah.
trust me. I'll include you on every show. We'll set a, you know, a flat amount. I'll include you on YouTube or Instagram or whatever, but I just need to
Yeah.
make my workflow seamless and simple and not change out sponsors every week or whatever. And so they were like, yeah, we get it. We support you. We would love to be a part of whatever you're doing. And so that's why Rourke and Veyer and Real Water Sports have been mainstays now, you know, for the indefinite
Yeah, man.
future.
Um, the partnership piece, having somebody that'll actually trust you, you know,
Yeah.
to get the message across and know that you're going to be even keel and not go off the rails on something, dude, that's insane. Because some
Yeah.
people are not going to do. I mean, there's a lot of folks, even here, even in the little world, you know, even in itty bitty, you know, podunk stuff that we do. There's people that are not going to trust you to be like get their message across. They
Hmm.
want control, you know, they want to have hands on. And the fact that you've got some of these folks that are such amazing, like Reel's insane. Dude,
They're the best.
those guys are amazing.
Yeah.
That they're trusting you to just be like, yeah, dude, go for it. You know, you
Yeah.
got it. So
Well, for listeners and YouTube followers, we're going to be giving away product from them too, not just surfboards, but Veyer is going to be contributing a certain number of watches every year that we're going to be giving away, and Rourke is going to be contributing a certain dollar amount every month that we can then give you the code, the basic, you know, the discount code, gift card, whatever, and then you go to their website and you can purchase. So stay tuned for that stuff. But like I said, follow on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube, and you'll see all of that stuff in the next month or so. But
yeah.
Clint, I need to know about you, the winner. You're the first surfboard winner that we've ever actually interviewed. So I want to know the backstory on Clint. And also, it hasn't been stated yet. You referred to it, but you build surfboards as well. So give me the
Yeah,
backstory and then how you ended
yeah.
up building boards.
Well, I'm from a small town in Oregon. I grew up in the mountains. So I grew up like in the backcountry and I was snowboarding when snowboarding was like first starting and skateboarding and BMXing and all that stuff. And from there, I ended up in the military, like a lot of people in small towns do.
Yeah.
In my area, there was really not a lot of options. So a way out, from pretty poor upbringings is the military, and a lot of people do that. And it was a blessing for me because it was an opportunity to get out of that situation, to get out of just rural, stuck life of being stuck in a factory. I worked in a factory, as a kid,
Wow.
and that was it. You work in a factory, or you go up in the woods and you log, or you drive a truck. That was the lifestyle.
Yeah.
My father was a truck driver, families, mill workers, so everybody was just like, you go work in the mill, you do you work in a factory. And I was like, 80s and 90s, it was super depressed. And it was like, I can't keep doing this. And so, my father, all my family history is military, but I didn't really know that. I knew my grandfathers were in World War II and all that kind of stuff. And my dad was in Vietnam and all that. And I didn't have a lot of, I didn't have a lot of background. And eventually I was like, I got to get out of here. And so, like a lot of people, I was just like, oh, yeah, this random recruiter talked to me. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm not going to go do that army thing. I'm not going to do this. Oh, that Marine Corps thing. That seems like a challenge, because
Mm.
there's the beginning of the X Games and all that kind of stuff. And I was BMXing and racing mountain bikes and riding skateboards and stuff like that. So I was like, yeah, it seems like a challenge. And that changed everything. That was like that just changed my life and pointed me in a whole different direction. And didn't know what I was really going to do, and ended up becoming a combat photographer in the Marine Corps. And my first duty station was Camp Pendleton. So I
Wow.
went, I went, I went down the coast. I went to school in Maryland, and then I went down the coast and I went to Camp Pendleton. And of course, I didn't know at the time as a kid. I knew nothing about it. I was just like, I showed up and I'm like, by the time I made it to my first beach out there, I was like, this is, it's like going to Mecca. It's like, oh my
Hmm.
gosh. So everything was right there. My first when I first learned to surf, I was in Del Mar.
Yep.
Uh not a great, on base, not a great place to like just pick up surfing and think that you're gonna nail it the first go, and
Yeah.
got pounded and worked my way into Oceanside Harbor and then up to all of it, Carlsbad, and all of that stuff. And Marine Corps kind of took over. As life changes, and the military changed, especially with when we decided to go back into full tilt war for a while. And for me, I was a young guy with a family, and honestly, I couldn't afford a surfboard. I just couldn't. It wasn't even a tangible choice to even think I would buy a surfboard, with a wife and a young child. And so I was in a surf shop one day in South Carolina. I was stationed of all places in South Carolina, and I was looking at boards, and at the time, which is hilarious now, I was looking at boards, and they were like, I want to say they were like $475 or something for a brand new surfboard, right, at the surf shop.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm literally looking around going, who in the world has $475, for a
Yeah.
surfboard?
Yeah.
And the guy working in there was joking, and he was like, well, you could make your own. And I was like, really? As a kid, I made everything that I had as a kid. And he was like, well, yeah, you could buy a blank, it's not that big. This is all like infancy of the internet and all that kind of stuff. And so I was like, sick. And he's like, here's the number to Clark Foam down in Florida. And I legitimately called Clark Foam in Florida and got a box of like three blanks or something sent to my house on base. And that's how it started. I just ordered a box of Clarks and started on my own.
Ins-
Yeah.
Insane. So do you remember the
Yeah.
cost of the blanks? If you couldn't afford the
Oh my
475?
oh my gosh. They were like I think about it now and I'm like, why are they not still there? I wish I was still getting blanks at that price. I think they were like, oh my gosh, and this is like full retail. Like I'm nobody, so
Yeah, yeah.
they're charging me full tilt. And I still think they were maybe like 50, 60 bucks a blank, maybe
Yeah, yeah.
with like full, like, full tilt. And
Like longboard blanks or?
no, I was buying stuff to make. All I knew about was like, shortboards and stuff. And
Gotcha. Okay.
so which is,
Amazing.
the worst way to start. Like make this rockered out. They hand you, you get sent a blank. You don't even know what you're asking for,
No.
at that stage. No internet reference, no nothing. Just like, bro, I need some blanks. Send me something, that's like 6 to 7 foot, and I get a box of blanks that show up at my house. And I'm like, okay. And it was epic. Oh my gosh, my wife was ready to choke me. I'm in the literally right next to our kitchen was the garage door, and I'm in there with a planer that I bought at a swap meet, grinding away, just having at it. And it was all
Did
time.
um how did you know the processes, cutting an outline, drawing a template on, like which tools do you use? How did you learn any of that?
Oh my gosh, man. Well, first of all, I tried to ask around. And in South Carolina, there was like back in the day, this is like early 2001, 2002,
Yeah.
right? Super infancy. There's a little bit of stuff like the internet was happening. There's a few things out there. And I'll tell you what, man, I tried to talk to a couple of shapers and literally got like the door slammed in my face. It was like, and I got like, hey, who am I? I'm nobody. So I started finding just a couple of bits and pieces on like the archaic version of the internet, and was like, yeah, sick. I can figure this process out. We can figure this out. Until it came to laminating
Right.
with
Of course.
with poly resin. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just everything went sideways. But it was epic, right? Like it was all
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
make something and throw it together and go.
How'd that first board turn out?
It totally worked. It worked. The board worked. It surfed. It didn't stay glass long.
Okay.
You know what I mean? The board worked. I surfed it, which is hilarious. Like surfing in South Carolina, you're scrapping for anything. Wind swell, you take anything. And so we went out, we surfed it, and I surfed the board, and it was great. But it took like 5 minutes for the board to start delaminating and coming apart.
Wow. That
So
quick.
it was comical, man. It was hilarious because I
Um,
didn't realize I didn't realize, and nobody told me. Everybody sold me all the stuff, didn't say a word. They're like, nobody said, hey, you should probably put wax additive in there when you're trying to do your sanding coat.
yeah. The
So I
fact
just
that
had
you even
laminating resin.
the fact that you even knew to sand the board is already better than other people. You know what I mean? Like you certainly had did you also glass the fins on?
No, this was FCS, original FCS plugs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got
I
it.
did glass-ons later because I didn't want to rip out the old single plugs.
Yeah.
But the first go was just me with a freaking drill with a hole saw, putting
Gotcha.
in the original FCS plugs. But
Crazy.
yeah,
So,
and then when it delaminated, I just stripped it down and made another board out of it.
oh,
I
okay.
didn't even at that point. I didn't even care. I was just like, well, sick. Is all the glass going to come off? Yep, it all just rips right off. And then I cut it down and I made a fish out of it.
Perfect. And how did that one turn out?
Sick. I actually still have it. I still have the
No,
original blank.
no
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, it's in the rafters.
Amazing. So the other thing that I was thinking about is you're learning how to surf probably along the same timeline, right? So I'm
Yeah,
wondering how much did your own shapes impede your surfing progress? Or
dramatically.
okay. Yeah. Because if you just had the $475 to buy like a very functional surfboard, you could probably catch a few waves, get down the line, do a cutback at some point. But if you're riding a
Right.
board that's delaminating, it's going to slow you down.
Yeah, I mean, I started off. I had a kid in Southern California make me a board. When I first started, I was, like everybody in the '90s was riding pointy thrusters, and I was like, I can't even make this thing go. Like I'm 6'2", you know what I mean? Like
Mm.
a pointy little thruster, like I couldn't. It was awful. It was miserable. And so I had this kid make me like basically, for lack of a better term, a mal, but like a mal from the '90s, right?
Hmm.
And that's what sparked it for me. This kid came in and he made me like a 7/8 mal, and I caught I caught a couple of sick waves in Southern California that were like the waves that changed everything. That
Wow.
was the click. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is it. You can, when you get, everybody has a wave somewhere along the way in the beginning process when it clicks and you're like, that's it. Like,
Hmm.
this is what I'm doing. I'm doing this. And then once that happened, I was on that trajectory. The difference was once I started making boards, I was trying to figure out how to make a surfboard, you know,
Yeah.
and oh my gosh, you know, you start making stuff and you're like, oh no, no, that doesn't, okay, try that. Nope. Cut something off of that one and make it into something, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's just how that's just how it went.
Do you know who the kid was that made that board in Southern California? What his name was?
His last name is Reed. And I
Does
haven't
he
tried to
is he
find him.
does he have like a label now that we would know?
No,
Okay.
no, I think he did it for a little bit and I think he bounced. I don't know if he's in the
Okay.
industry at all. I haven't tried to find him,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, like, you know, he made me this just typical 7'8" mal and as a thruster with glass-ons,
Wow.
down in Oceanside. He was working at
Yeah.
he was renting space down at one of the shops down in Oceanside.
Mm.
And that board was, I still have the board. It's
Amazing.
completely brown, has holes all through it, still have it. Like
Yeah.
some of these things are like, lifelong keepers that are, that changed kind of my path and direction. So
Good. I'm glad
uh,
that you had the foresight to keep that stuff. Because especially when you're running on a shoestring budget like that, it's so easy just to sell one to get to the next one.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I'm sure you've heard this a million times, but dude, I've sold boards just in the act of progress.
Yeah.
I've sold boards that I would pay triple to get back now,
Yeah.
for real. Like boards that were just like, oh, why did I let that thing go?
Yeah.
I don't care if I ever surfed it again, but to have it because of what it meant in my progression and what I was doing in my shaping at the time or wherever I was in the world, because I've traveled all over the world. So shaping, maybe I made that one in, I don't know, maybe I made it in South Carolina and it was super special because of that era. And
Mm.
I made a ton of boards in Japan, and there's some that hold like, that are really special from that time frame. So it's just
Were
how,
you, were you in Japan doing the photography work?
I was stationed there. Yeah. I was in the Marine Corps for 24 years. So I traveled all over the place, um, to some really great places and to some really, really awful places. But Japan was amazing. We lived in Japan. My family and I lived in Japan off and on for 8 years. A
Wow.
little tiny island called Okinawa in way down in the Pacific. And oh man, surf was unbelievable.
Was
Yeah.
it really?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's
I-
one of the places I could like, mentally go back to in a split second and be on a wave there again, and Chris, like see the reef going underneath you as you're dropping into a wave, and just unbelievable. Just
Wow.
amazing.
And
Yeah.
did you have access to board? Obviously, you were building boards while you were there, right? Were you working with maneuver
Yeah.
line, getting materials?
No, so I had a friend, a good friend of mine had a surf shop there. Um, and he was gracious enough to um source the parts and a lot of the parts and pieces for me,
Hmm.
um, which is incredibly hard to do. Like anything that is like, what we would pay for any supplies. Obviously in California, your stuff is way cheaper even for me than I am here in North Carolina because it's got a ship and all that nonsense. But take anything, any surf supply that you could think of. doesn't matter if it's a blank, resin, doesn't matter what it is. Take any surf supply and triple it, minimum, triple it. And then, then you're trying to find it on that island, or get it shipped to you and so on and so forth. And I was lucky enough to have some vendors back here, some
Mm,
awesome people back here in the States that were willing to ship things to me, directly to me. And then a good friend who had a surf shop that was willing to like source the blanks and help me out,
wow.
um, in between. So if it wasn't for them, there's no way.
Yeah.
I couldn't have done it. But I ended up shaping a lot of surfboards in Japan.
Wow. Okay. And developing a customer base there that was buying them?
Yeah, it's crazy. The military folks were like the boards. So the boards in Japan are made for Japanese folks. And
Okay.
I'm 6'2" and 230. They're like five,
I see where you're going with this.
six. So the boards, like I would go to a surf shop and the boards were like, I mean, beyond toothpick for us. You know what I mean? Like you'd
Mhm.
pick up a board and it was like, hi guys, like, you'd pick it up and you'd be like, can anybody rip? But they rip,
Yeah.
they're killing it. So yeah, I'd get blanks shipped in from Australia, like Bennett foams and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And it was sick because I could make a board for a bigger human, and the military folks were, I had a great customer base for a while. It was awesome.
That's incredible. What a
Yeah.
little perfect little niche side project for you. You have built-in
Yeah.
clientele in the military and they can't get product anywhere else. You're the only guy.
Yeah. Well, and if you're buying, like I was doing stuff very close to cost, just enough to like keep
Sure.
doing it.
Yeah.
And if you're buying anything in Japan, like again, retail, it's like triple. It's
Yeah.
like triple, So they'd have boards around, but people would walk in and be like, "Oh my gosh, $2,000? What?" For a small board, and people were tripping out. So it made a great little opportunity, for me to jump in and be like, I'm doing this anyways. I'm going to make boards for myself regardless. So if I make boards for a couple of friends and some people that, show up, I mean, I was in my backyard for 5 years on a little bitty island shaping surfboards in a tent, like just in a tent. And it was all time. People walk through the neighborhood and just stop with their kids to watch me shape a surfboard or something in the backyard
Yeah.
and then high five and, move on, keep going. So yeah, it was a
What a
blast.
what a
Yeah.
story. Did mentors ever get involved? Was there ever a time in any of these locations where you could actually develop a relationship with another shaper to glean insights?
No,
No, not at
no,
all.
so frustrating.
It's
Like
crazy.
yeah, I've taught a bunch of people to shape now over the last several years. People who are like real, like actually want to do it.
Yeah.
You've always got people that are like, "Oh, that's so rad! I want to totally do that." The looky loos, and people who are like want to show up and just hang out and like, "How did you do that?" And as soon as they know, they split. Um, but I've had a couple of really, really rad folks that have come through that really want to actually know how to do it.
Mhm.
And dude, I'll bend over backwards to invest in those folks because there's only a couple people recently that were willing to even talk to me. You know, Even when you're trying to like bounce ideas off of somebody or be like, "Hey, man, what are your thoughts on that?" Um, the surf world is so weird.
It is. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, with the internet now, obviously, and Instagram, you see people
Yeah,
shaping and laminating and all, and you can just glean insights from there. But
yeah.
yeah, that's crazy. Okay, so my other question was going to be, at any point did you start purchasing other surfboards, or were you kind of always riding your own boards?
I've had a couple of other folks' surfboards, um, good and bad, which is super cool. So I've bought like I bought a board in this for the sake of like R&D. Like I want to buy this board and try it and see how it goes. And I'm not going to say who it was, but it was awful. It was the board did not work at all as per the description. And like I said, I'll leave it. I'll leave it nameless, but it's so funny, man. Like people tell you, the board's going to do this and it's going to do that. And it's like, oh, okay, let's see, let's try it out. And conversely, I've gotten other boards and just been blown away by the quality and how well the boards, how well the boards work. But it's definitely something for me personally. There's a handful of folks. I actually started making a list. You guys are always talking about like if you get a board from anybody, and I actually
Mm.
started making a list like who are the dudes? Because there's so many guys that we're losing,
Mm.
that I'd love to get a board from. And man, there's a lot of amazing surfboard builders. I mean,
Who would be on that list for you?
uh, obviously Skip's way up there. Hank, I actually have a board in my shop right now that I'm doing repair work on that Hank shaped, and it's insane. It's like you look at it and you're like, this is so far beyond its years. Like this board
Really?
is so far beyond like the people who had it, who bought it, they didn't even know what they didn't even know what they had. And I'm like, this board is not meant to like sit around in the short break. He made this board to do business, you know what I mean?
Mm.
To get out. And you can tell it's there in the shape, you
Yeah.
know. Um Man, I'm a huge fan of Christian Beamish. Him and I have messaged a little bit. The boards, his mid length for black belts, the stuff
Mhm.
he's working on, the trajectory he's on is so rad. And there's a handful of other guys. I mean, especially some of the older dudes. You know,
Yeah.
goodness, before we lose them, it's be awesome to.
I mean, that is a great point because the earliest of pioneers are still with us. I mean, some
Yeah, it's
have gone,
insane.
some have passed away, but even those were just in recent years, like the Ben Ipas and the Dick Brewers. But Yater's still around,
Yeah,
McTavish is still around, Greeno's still around. Like you could get, I mean,
yeah, yeah,
it,
yeah. And there's even legends here, on the East Coast that they're still making boards.
yeah,
They're still going at it full tilt. Um, there's just oh man, there's so many.
yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. I look at
Um,
Oli, some of Oli's boards and like those old, and he's still making them. You know what I
I
mean?
know.
It's like, gee, Merry Christmas, man. It's so
I,
rad.
it is, it's crazy to think also that some of those guys, like, they're not even that busy. Like Skip, I'm sure has 2 years worth of orders backed up in the queue. But there's other guys like
Yeah,
Simon Anderson will make you a thruster, and he was not going to charge you
yeah,
$3,000 for it. You can still just get it regular price.
yeah,
So that's kind of what's wild about the surf world. So yeah, maybe
yeah. It's insane.
set a goal of like put away $100 a month and then once a year invest in one of those boards or something like that.
I gotta sell a lot of surfboards to put away $100 a month, man, for
I know.
surfboards.
I
Gee,
know.
Christmas.
So let's talk about that a little bit. I guess you've left the military since. What was behind the idea of leaving the military? And are you now
Yeah,
building surfboards full time?
yeah, yeah. I retired in 2020. I just, dude, you just get so beat up, man. You can only live that life for so long. And I was super thankful. I was really, really thankful that I could go that long. I had so many surgeries to put me back together and keep me rolling.
Mm.
Um, but by the time I got to the end, it was like, my doctors were like, listen, man, we we can only put you back together so much. You're gonna have to make a decision on what you want to do. And by the time I got to 24, I was like, it's time, for my family and for everybody else. We had come back to North Carolina here at Camp Lejeune. I'm like right outside the base. I'm like legitimately like 10 minutes, outside the base. And it was just time. I had run my era, you know, um, of doing Iraq and Afghanistan and just doing the cycle over and over again. And you just, it's just not a, it's a lifestyle that you just can't sustain. And I went at it for a long time, you know,
Yeah.
before it finally caught up with me and it was like, it's time to go. So I was super thankful to make it as far as I did and then be able to punch out and still have, still got all my fingers and toes. Most stuff doesn't work right, but I've still got everything. So I'm
Good.
super thankful for that. And yeah, when I got done, I got offered, man, this is how they do it. This is how the government does it, man. You do one thing and you finish up and you're like, oh, I know you don't want to do that anymore, but we'll offer you another job doing the same thing as a civilian. And I got offered a handful of jobs, and I just wasn't my thing. I was just ready to
Mm.
go do something else. And I talked to my wife about it, and I was like, hey, listen, we've got the retirement. She has her own photo studio, and um, the kids are both in college, and all that kind of stuff. So it's like it's time. I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna try it. And I've been making boards at my house forever, my little shop at my house. And I was like, you know what? I think I can do it. I think I can build it out. I think I can manage it. And so yeah, it's been, geez, man, I've been building boards for over 20 years, but it's been 4 years as an actual business of making surfboards and slowly building out my shop piece by piece.
And laminating your own boards too?
Yeah, nobody else touches them. I do them start to finish.
Amazing. And
Yeah,
what style of boards are you building?
everything, man, everything. I'll do like that master monster 14-foot glider
Hmm.
all the way down to, like a 4-foot something, Simmons, boxy little, you know, that's one of the things that I never wanted to do. And I think I got a little jaded with the industry, and people kind of, you come around and you want to ask questions and stuff. And I get it, people are busy and they're working, but um, the pointy white thruster thing just wasn't for me. It
Yeah.
wasn't my deal. And even though I like performance boards, I'm a bigger dude, so I would always modify stuff and make it, a little bit different. And so I make absolutely everything, and I try to ride most of it if I can. I can't ride I can't ride a 6.0 2.5 inch thick, pointy nose thruster, but I can I can ride the other stuff, that's for sure. So
Sweet.
um yeah, I started making Simmons and fish and mid lengths and performance boards and long stuff, and working on my big boards. And yeah.
And as a business, how has it been for the last 4 years? Are you building clientele? Have they been supportive of the project? Are you able to charge prices that allow you to have some profit margin, or are you still doing the bro deal for everybody who's on base?
Yeah, I started off like right when I retired. I started making boards, and I had no context, right? And I was making boards way too cheap, way too cheap. And I had somebody, one instance where somebody haggled me on a board that was already bro dealed out, and they were hassling me. And it was like, and I stopped and I was like, I'm not your guy,
Good,
and
good.
that click changed everything. And I got a couple of really, really awesome business advisors that were like, at the time, obviously COVID was kicking. And a couple of my really good buddies and business advisors were like, bro, you need to go the other way. You need to go, straight north and don't come back. And it was super scary. I was like, what? I've never charged that much for a surfboard. And they were like, you need to, and don't look back.
Mm,
And as soon as I did, the hassling just vanished.
good.
It just vanished. And so I think my boards are on the East Coast, or probably on the upper end on the East Coast, but it's a blessing. The people who show up are really like, they realize I'm making their board start to finish myself, and the hours involved in the work. Everything's custom, from the color work to the shaping. I shape everything by hand still. I don't use CNC machines, nothing. And everything's epoxy. I don't use any polyester resin. It's all
Oh,
epoxy.
wow.
Poly,
Why?
poly or PU. It's such a better material, man. Makes such a better surfboard in the end.
Okay.
It's just a better board. So epoxy resin on either core, EPS or poly, and people are just stoked on it. My customer base has just been, the folks have been amazing. The people who are here and who are supporting, it's been really cool. Yeah.
Um, Glad to hear that. And so can you illuminate a little bit for listeners? Why is epoxy a better resin, and why does it make a better surfboard? And is there anything that you give up by using it?
You give up profit, that's for sure. You give up money.
So it's more
Yeah,
expensive.
it's minimum now. It's more than double the cost of poly resin. A gallon of epoxy is more than double a gallon of poly, hands
Okay.
down.
Okay.
Um, so I'm giving up money, but my product at the end of the day is far superior. I still glass traditionally. I use a traditional layup methods and things like that, but epoxy has as a chemical product, it's more of a glue than it is, like a resin. So with epoxy, the cool thing is it has 4-time elongation. It's going to elongate 4 times the distance of a polyester resin, and that flex and comeback is what makes a board last so much longer. Even with traditional fiberglass, it's going to last far longer if it's used correctly. You don't burn through it, you don't overheat it, all that kind of stuff. It just makes a superior board. And after I started talking to the chemists. I took the time, Mike. I went all the way back and was like, am I on the right path? And started talking to the chemists, and they're like, dude, you're going to make the best board possible that you can make with traditional layup, going beyond, taking other methods of board construction. And I don't want to go crazy. And, I wanted to be something that I could sustain and do here in my little shop.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So that 4 times elongation or elasticity is it translates to essentially durability and longer life. But I've heard that epoxy is also harder. Is that true?
So epoxy, it's really interesting. Epoxy it it wants to stretch and come back. Or it's not nearly as brittle. Poly is amazing product, especially on like bigger boards and stuff that's not going to flex as much. But epoxy is going to stretch and come back. It's going to keep coming back as a material with that elongation, and it just lasts so much longer. The difference is one of the toughest parts, especially if you're doing everything yourself, like by hand. It does not like to sand. It just doesn't. So I've had to get the right machines and the right process and the right tools to make sure that I can actually sand and finish it and not burn through it, and not mess it up. Because the reality is, you start burning through an epoxy finish, the board's, like any board, it's going to weaken the board and it's going to fail. So it takes a lot of technique and stuff to finish it correctly. But at
Got
the
it.
end of the day, it's a pretty amazing product at the end.
Got it. So not only is it twice the price, but it's probably twice as difficult to work with.
Yeah, I mean, any of the big shops, you talk to any of the big shops, unless they're set up to do it. Like nowadays, a lot of folks are set up to do it. But you talk to any of the old poly shops, they don't want anything to do with it. They don't want to
Yeah.
touch it. They don't want it in their shop. They don't want anything to do with it, which I understand. If you've got your method down, if you're making outstanding poly boards, that's amazing. Those boards are insane. You know what I mean? Like I look at some of the stuff that's going on, in your neck of the woods, and dude, the work is unbelievable. It's awesome. But once I committed to going the epoxy route, I never looked back, you
Gotcha.
know?
Amazing.
So
Well, the reason we're talking is because you won this Exo Coco Halcyon mid-length.
yeah.
How many boards do you actually build for female surfers? What percentage of your customer base is female?
Um, I was actually thinking about that after I got your email. I actually probably about 20%. So I have a pretty good mix of female customers, um, which is rad because the boards are just made completely different than a guy's board. The boards they're just different. But on a custom level, for making custom surfboards, any shaper that's been shaping for a while and has made boards for ladies knows the board has to be made differently. So I'm stoked on the concept, of what Matt Parker and them are doing. It's awesome.
Well, what are the accommodations that you've made in your boards when building for female surfers?
Well, the boards for most of my female riders, the boards are going to be narrower to accommodate their shoulders. Their shoulders are narrower, their center of gravity is lower. Um, so depending on where, how they're surfing, where their level is at, because I've got some ladies who are like actually like, they're pretty good surfers, and then I have some um that are much newer surfers. So they're looking for a different surfboard altogether. They're very different surfboards, from an entry level, like, hey, I just need I need you to consistently be able to get to your feet, get into waves and get to your feet, and build that consistency. That's a different surfboard. But I'm still going to make it narrower. Um, and the thickness of the board is going to change a little bit as well.
Mm.
With a lower center of gravity, I'm going to move that thickness around a little bit to help them out, so they're not pushing a bunch of water and they're able to continue to keep themselves on plane. And then for the ladies who know what they're doing, a lot of it's going to change. It's a smaller board, period. Like they're just going to have a totally different sized board.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah, interesting. Well, what are your expectations for the XO Coco? Did you discuss with Matt yet the size or any of that stuff?
yeah, they don't make anything for oddly enough, they don't make any XO Coco boards for a dude who's 6'2" and two 235. So he's gonna graciously he's gonna cut me one that's a little upsized
Okay,
for
good.
me. So
Well, the other thing I was
I really
thinking,
wanted to get it. I really want to get it to a lady. I really was hoping I had somebody that I could get it to, but I just don't have somebody where I can get it to them, and it's just not going to end up, sitting in a corner or something. So
I mean, the other thing I was thinking is it's based off of an album. He was saying that XO Coco Halcyon was based off of an album model that they made for Asher Pacey. And so they could just give you the Asher model. And I know the purpose of this was to highlight XO Coco, but we've already highlighted it for a month, and given that project
yeah.
plenty of love. So let's just get you the board that makes the most sense for you.
Yeah. Yeah, the design, the Halcyon design is insane. I didn't realize that it was an Asher, like it started from Asher.
Yeah.
'Cause that doesn't, like, the dimensions that I see Asher on are like, he's riding like a 5 foot something, and
Yeah.
that board, but that Halcyon looks insane with that very soft but very deep wing into
Yeah.
that pin. That looks insane.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what Matt was saying too, is like he's ridden Matt himself has ridden the Asher model, and then he's obviously ridden
Mhm.
the Halcyon model as well. And he said the difference between the two is basically the Halcyon model is just more rippable. Like the
Yeah.
Asher model is traditional mid length where you are horizontal surfing and lots of
Yeah.
speed and flow and stuff like that. But then the Coco model, because of that narrower tail and a couple other details, it's just like makes it more high performance. Basically, you can kind of snap the thing and go vert with it and stuff like that. So
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, it's super
yeah,
cool. The
yeah,
board looks amazing. I went through their website. I looked at all the models on the Exo Coco website. Every one of them looks super fun. They all looked insane. But that Halcyon looks like it's got some spice on it, especially for a mid, something that's in that mid range.
well,
So I'm pumped
for
on it.
somebody who, now that I know your story, hasn't been able to purchase a lot of surfboards, I'm excited now that this thing's going to you.
Yeah, I'm pumped, man. It's funny. I was telling my wife, I'm like, I don't ever like win anything, like nothing. Like I'm donating surfboards to one of our local charities or something. That's usually what's going on, and I'm making a board for whatever ocean conservation or the fire department with burn victims or whatever. Like I'm every year I'm putting boards out to somebody,
Yeah.
which is a blast. I enjoy that. I really enjoy that process. But I got your email and I was telling my wife, I was sitting on the couch, I'm like, I think I want a surfboard. And she was like, what? She's like, you make surfboards. I was like, I know. This is super cool. I know who these people are, and I've always wanted one of these boards. So it's really rad. Yeah.
Good. I'm really glad. What beaches are you near? I don't know where Camp Lejeune is exactly in North Carolina, but what beaches are your local spots?
Yeah. So I don't surf any of the local spots.
Okay.
I have access to places that a lot of people, can't really get to. So this morning was insane. We had, oh my gosh, sidebar, total tangent. I apologize, but this is total tangent.
Yeah.
Me, one other buddy, nobody, not a soul, as far as you could see in any direction, anywhere, up and down the entire beach. Beautiful open coastline, nothing but beach waves and so open space. And him and I literally just laughed all morning and traded off waves, chest high, just constant and having fun, laughing the whole time and hooting at each other for over 2 hours before I came in here. And that's why I'm over here.
Amazing.
It's insane. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what are the well-known beaches in your area, just to give me a frame of reference?
So where we're at, Camp Lejeune is framed north and south by two different locations. One is Emerald Isle, and Emerald Isle is a very, I don't want to say bougie, but it's like a nice area that has really accessible beaches. Awesome location. It's got more south facing beach, so it takes a lot. It takes south swell on the East Coast a lot better. Um, we're kind of in the middle, and then south of us is Topsail and Surf City, and then way south of us is Wilmington and Wrightsville. Wrightsville Beach and stuff like that. So we're kind of nestled in between all of that. Um, there are spots here that turn on. Obviously, piers like everybody else surfs a pier. Um, there's piers all up and down the East Coast, and everybody loves hoarding around them. I hate it, and
Hmm.
we can go vanish. Luckily,
Yeah.
and just split and get waves to ourselves. So it still exists here.
I
You know.
love that area. My wife actually lived on Topsail Island for a year.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, I know, believe it or not. And then I've spent time around there and in Wilmington and stuff. And we actually kind of fantasize about just picking up and going back there and living there because we both love the quality of life. So,
Yeah, it's insane. If you're going to get here, though, you need to get here. It's changing fast. It's changing like it's wild how fast it's changing. You know,
yeah, yeah.
um,
Well,
but
the secret's out, man.
it is. I'm just thankful that I have access to places where the general population can't get. So it's
Well,
wonderful.
along those lines, when you were in Southern California, did you actually surf on Pendleton at all?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I drove through it yesterday, literally. For listeners who haven't been, it's basically a stretch between the very south tip of Orange County and the very north tip of San Diego that's all military base. And the 5 freeway goes through it, so you have to drive through it if you're going south or north, but you can see the coast. You can actually see the waves for little moments in that drive. And
Yeah.
but there's the vast majority of it you actually can't see. So I have
Right.
no idea. I presume because, of course, Trestles is just north of it. And then, of course, San
Right.
Diego has great waves just south of it. I presume there's great waves throughout Pendleton, but there's no way to get on the base. And then I didn't know if they allowed you to actually just go to the coast and surf if you're on the base. Um, but presumably,
No,
I
no,
guess you
you
can.
can't.
Oh, okay.
There's areas that you absolutely cannot. They're training areas, and
Okay.
they're not accessible for good reason. Like it's not a safe place to be. So there's areas that are very specifically training areas where they'll practice, water egress, ingress. They're doing beach landing stuff. They're doing all kinds of training, and no, those are not accessible. But when you get down south in like the Del Mar area, there's beach access down there on the other side of the jetty, and there's all kinds of stuff. Now, I've been down there when it was absolutely throttling, and I mean, that's a place to get pounded, like absolutely pounded. Um, but yeah, there's access points there,
Okay.
and at the very north end of the base as well. Yeah.
So, but the vast majority of it is still unsurfable.
Yeah, there's no access to it. And,
Gotcha.
and like I said, it's blocked off for a very specific reason.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean,
It's
surfing
not a,
trestles, my whole life or young life, you would hear these sonic booms. You'd just be in the
yeah,
lineup and you just feel the reverb and just boom. And that was the
right.
training that they were doing 20 miles south.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, so I'm pretty sure they still do. I mean, we would shoot artillery, over like across the base. So you'd be doing, we'd be out there on ranges. I knew on the other side of the mountain range, there's waves breaking, and I'd be out in the like out in the middle of nowhere, you know, just sucking at life. And you'd be out there training on gun ranges and dreaming about the waves on the other side of on the other side of the mountain range. So
Right.
it's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Well,
Not cool when you're stuck in when you're stuck in the field for, a couple of weeks, but
yeah, yeah. Well, I will say the reason I was in San Diego this past weekend was my wife's brother is actually a Navy SEAL
mm,
and he's being deployed later this month. And so we're visiting him, doing like a going away party for the weekend. And then I have two brothers who are actually in the military. One's in, actually, they're both in North Carolina. Um, and so what I wanted to say was just like, I am so grateful that you and them are willing to do the work because, like, you're talking about your background growing up in Oregon, there wasn't a lot of options or any, like, I understand why my brothers got into it and all that kind of stuff. And I am not built for it. And I would hate to be forced into, going at a young age because I really feel like it's just, I'm not built for it. I'm so grateful that people are willing to do it so that I don't have to. Because obviously it's a necessity for our country, but um, I'm just grateful for the service. So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, man, it's an amazing community. Um, I think that, sometimes you stumble, like in my case, you kind of stumble into it and you realize you kind of find your calling and it becomes your life. It becomes a lifestyle, and what
Yeah.
you want to do. And then other people, it's not, they come and they serve and they want to serve their country and they do their first tour and they get out and they move on and they become amazing Americans, and do other
Hmm.
stuff. Um, I was just really, really thankful that I was able to be able to do what I did for as long as I did and get to meet so many incredible people, man. I mean, just I had so many people that I got to work with that were just some of the most amazing human beings that you could possibly, they'd give you the shirt off their back and they would do it in the middle of a firefight. They didn't care.
Yeah.
Conversely, I had young kids that would come in that were just looking for direction in life. They just needed something and they thought they
Yeah.
would, their goal was to come into the military to get some kind of direction. And that was awesome too, because you're able to help some folks get on a path, and see what was
Mm.
next for them and what they wanted to do in life. So
My two younger brothers, one of them, it's absolutely his life's calling and he is all about it. He will do it as a full career for the rest of his life. And the other one,
mhm.
the younger one, needed an opportunity to do something. And so this provided that opportunity. But after the 4 years or the 6 years or whatever it is, he's going to bail and go
Yeah.
find something
Yeah.
else to do. And I think he's
What
grateful
they
for the time, but yeah.
yeah. What do they do?
So the older of the two brothers is in intelligence, and
Mm.
then the younger of the two is just like basic infantry.
Army, Marine Corps.
Army. Yeah, both army.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's funny how it works, people like your older brother find their calling and they're like, this is it, man. This is I found what I want to be doing. I didn't realize I wanted to be a combat photographer. I didn't know that,
Mm,
I had an art background, but I didn't know I wanted to pick up a camera and go chase people, into the field and, do that kind of work. And once I found it, I was like, oh yeah, this is it. This is what I want to do. So
where does
I
that
get it.
photography end up?
Well, it a lot of it ends up in the archives, in the national archives. Depends on what you're filming. A lot of stuff that I did was not publishable. You know, so there's certain things that you're going to do that aren't for the general public. um, whether they're information sources or they're for, different optics for folks. And then there's a lot of stuff that you do that is just good old fashioned, like, hey, we're documenting exactly what's going on today and wherever we're at and, in the world and what the Marines are doing. And then that ends up all over the place, whether it becomes public media, like most of the stuff now, if it's been shot or filmed or whatever else, and it's public media, anybody can access it. It can be
Hmm.
accessed anywhere. And so I would go film things and, like, in 2003, I was in OIF 1, when we went into Iraq. And I filmed a bunch of stuff, and before I knew it, it was on the news, or it was on the History Channel or something. And you're like, how did that happen? But
Yeah.
that's the all of that media has a source and a home and a place and use, if it's documented and taken care of and processed correctly. So it's really cool to see where this stuff ends up in the long run.
I mean,
Yeah.
I just never even thought of the job. I mean, I'm aware, if I guess if I thought about it, there is obviously somebody who's doing that work because I see the imagery.
Mhm.
But I just never thought of that job before. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's comical. Being the guy in the field with everybody else that has the same gear as everybody else, and then I'm also carrying camera equipment or chasing somebody down with camera equipment and filming and all that kind of stuff is it's just totally different. It's just a totally different life. Like, you have to really, really want to do that work. You have to want to do it because
Well,
it's not an easy gig, and you end up getting exposed to, you put yourself in positions to get a shot that you think is going to be the right shot to show people what needs to be seen. And it yeah
well,
it's
that's why I was saying, like, I'm grateful that you and other people are willing to do that work, because it's no joke, man. You really have to want to do it, and especially to do it well. Um, my brother-in-law, who's the Navy SEAL, I don't know if you probably saw the news story a month ago about the two Navy SEALs who died.
yeah.
One of those guys was his like best friend.
Ugh,
And and so my brother-in-law has a 1-year old and a young wife, and that made it all very, very real. When
yeah,
he was driving the widow to the funeral, and so him
yeah,
being deployed on this latest one this month, it's like it feels a lot more real than the previous deployment because something hit that close to home. And I just realized, I'm like, man, would I do this? Like with my wife and my kid? Like, I don't know that you could pay me enough to do it. You can't. So the fact that he's
yeah.
willing to, or other people are willing to, I'm like, man, I'll support this to all ends because I'm so grateful that you have that passion for doing it.
Yeah, there's nothing tougher. We have a young military couple in one of our church groups, and the husband just deployed. I've been through more deployments than I can count. And my wife, she was also a Marine. We lived this life for decades. So when I would have to leave, we understood what the repercussions of living this lifestyle is. And most people, I don't think, really understand the repercussions of living a life of being a military person across the board.
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of fathom that process, but it's actually tougher for me now to have our young friends deploy than it was for me to deploy.
Hmm.
It's weird how that works over time because
Hmm.
they're so young. I mean, I look at some of these young folks now, they're young enough to be my kids are in their 20s. And I look at some of these young folks, and I'm like, oh man, these guys are young enough to be my kids. And I know what it's like to have to call parents, you know, it's not an easy thing.
No, I can't imagine. And
Yeah.
aside from those threats, just spending 6 months away from your young family alone is crazy.
Yeah. The worst part of the whole thing. Separating from your spouse is awful, but you and your spouse look each other in the face and you're adults and you high five and say, okay, we're doing this. This is happening. This is what's going on. And we're going to support each other to the end. The kids don't have a choice and they don't understand what's happening. So like the process of working with the children and going through that process, because when you disappear, everybody just goes, I don't know where dad went,
Mm-hmm.
and then later on you show up 8 months, sometimes like I did a year-long pump in Afghanistan. I did a
Crazy.
12-month pump and I didn't get to see my kids until the 8-month mark. Well, the first time I saw my kids 8 months later, and they were little. They were like, I shouldn't say little. They're like, I want to say around 8 years old or so. When I came home, they were completely different little people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like 8 months later for an 8-year-old is eternity. You know what I mean? That's forever.
Yeah.
So just going through those processes and dealing with the kids and watching what the kids have to go through and, coming home is amazing, but unfortunately, we got a lot of folks that don't get to come home and don't get their spouses back, and that's tough going.
It really is. I shudder to even think about it, but makes surfboards feel like a
Yeah,
fantasy job by
dude, this is
comparison.
I legitimately like I have to like check myself. I like Mondays. I love Mondays. I come diddy bopping into work and I'm just like, sweet, let's, I'm going to make some surfboards, and I'm hanging out in my shop and doing, making surfboards for people who are stoked to get a custom surfboard. They're just, most of my customers are just so pumped to, I send them photo updates on every step of the way, like I got your blank, I'm about to shape it. And like, hey, I'm halfway done shaping it. And they're just so stoked, nobody's hassling. They're like, yeah, you want yellow? Sure. Let's go yellow. You want inlays? Sure. Let's do it. It's epic. I'm so privileged to be able to be doing this now. It's truly a gift.
Epic, man. Well, I feel fantastic about who's receiving this board giveaway that we're doing this month. So I'm glad that it's going to you. Couldn't have gone to a better person.
Oh, thanks, man. Like I said, I wish I had a female I could size it down and make it just perfect, and have Matt like kick me a true one for a lady, but I just don't have somebody where I don't think it's going to end up in a corner somewhere or something like that. So I was like, you know what, I'll take it, I'll write it, we'll have fun with it. I'll let a bunch of other people write it, because that's what I do with everybody gets to ride
Yeah.
all the boards.
Yeah.
So
I'm fine
that's what I
with
did
it.
this morning. I traded off boards. Like this morning, I had a prototype I'm working on, and that's what we did this morning. We just trade off boards and hand off and high five. And I made a new prototype that I'm messing around with, and Leaf made me a new set of prototype fins.
No way.
Yes. So this morning,
NVS fins.
yeah. So this morning, I had a new board, a dialed, nice little prototype I'm tuning up. Only it's supersized for me, and then freaking brand new set of NVSs that are prototypes for me for my boards. And Leaf and I talked. We were just talking a month or so ago about like, hey, we're going to do this, this, and this. And he's like, cool, I got them. I'm going to ship them out to you. And he got 2 sets. And he's like, do you want me to send you both sets, or you want me to test them out over here? And I was like, dude, please test them over there. I'll test them over here, in our East Coast slop. You test them in some, in some decent waves, and it'll be a blast. So I got to test a new board and new fins, and
yeah, how cool are those guys, and what a resource NVS
oh,
fins.
oh my gosh, man. They've made me, over the last several years, they've made me a handful of prototypes, and I sell NVS, primarily NVS fins with my boards, all different flavors. Just because I know without a doubt, I know the G10 is G10.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I can't, there's a whole bunch of fins right now with a whole bunch of stuff in them, and I get it to change flex, whether it's honeycomb or whatever else. But I know that how G10 is manufactured, and it's the same every single time, and the quality's there. So
Yeah.
I can put them with my customs and not be worried about it at all. So
I know. So surfnvs.com is the website for anybody who wants to check them out. But it's two guys that run the business and they're
yeah,
passionate about the thing that they do. And then because it's only two of them, the customer service is crazy. Like you being able to, you're a small board builder, you don't have to meet some minimum order quantity of 50 fins and commit to that invoice and try to cover the cost. It's like you dial them up. They're like, what do you need? We'll help you design that. You need 2 sets? Sweet. We'll give you 2
yeah,
sets. Like it's a
yeah,
really amazing little resource.
yeah.
But
It's insane. And I'll tell you, he has reached out to me. You know, it's insane. Like I'll do orders and I'll be like, I screwed that up. And he'll literally just call me and be like, hey man, did you want this one or this one? Cool. What else do we need? Okay, good. He's like, I'll have it in the mail tomorrow. It's
yeah,
that like it's been insane.
yeah,
And
they're the
so
best.
working on this next set of customs. I'm working on a 5 fin set. I've got twins and other things, other models, but really haven't spent a lot of time focusing on like the performance side because there's so many good fins. But I have a template that I wanted to tweak. Dude, he dove on it in like 5 seconds. And he was
Amazing.
genning it up he was literally genning it up for me over the holiday to send them to get done. And I had them, dude, I think I had them last month. I think I got them last month. It was that
Yeah,
fast.
yeah,
So
yeah. Sounds about right.
yeah, it's insane.
Well, we haven't said it enough, if even once at all, but Runyon Surfboards is the name of your label. Clint at Runyon Surfboards. What's the Instagram? What's the website? Where can they get a hold of you?
Instagram's just Runyon Surf, and the website is runyonsurfboards.com. So
Sweet.
yeah,
Sweet.
yeah, man.
Well, man, this has been a real pleasure. And again, I thank you for your support for, I guess, over 4 years now, man. Thank you. I mean,
Yeah, of course,
it's incredible.
of course, dude. You guys keep doing what you're doing, man. Like
Yeah.
poke holes in everything. What you're doing is like seriously. I know Scott always tries to tamper it down and make it, put the PC back on it, but don't.
Yeah.
Just poke holes in everything. Keep doing what you guys are doing because it's epic.
All right.
Somebody
Well,
needs to.
I do need that validation every once in a while. So thank you for that. And yeah,
Yeah.
we will absolutely keep it up. And then I'm going to find myself, I've been there to your neck of the woods 6 times in my life, and my wife wants to go again. So I'll find myself there at some point in the next couple of years, and we'll definitely connect in person.
Oh yeah. I'll get you to some good surf spots.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I was hinting at. All right.
All
Thank you, Clint.
right, man. Take care.
Surf Splendor.